And I'll start all over. We're lucky today to have two world-class artists here. One in visual arts, and of course, Barb Rosenstock is in the literary art world, and really great people. So you collaborated on 4 books together, and we'd like you to talk about your process. What are your roles in telling your stories? I think we can try to relate to this because all artists are trying to be a storyteller of some kind. So how do you start? What are your roles?
Mary, you want me to go first since technically I start?
Start the ball rolling, Barbara. Yes.
Right. Technically I start. I don't know why, or I don't really know how. So any of you who are like, have inspiration, just kind of come. I just kind of keep my mind open for things. And just going back to the very first book, which was The Noisy Paint Box, I was looking to write about Van Gogh, and Kandinsky is obviously not Van Gogh, and ran across this article, literally an internet article that is titled "The Man Who Heard His Paint Box Hiss." And I thought, what does that even mean? Like, who would hear what is a paint box? Why would it make sound? And that literally, it was the inspiration for what became this story. So what I do is just literally 5 sheets of paper. It's kind of all it looks like, and became this book. Mary might not even know this, but the second book we did together, Vincent Can't Sleep, she was the inspiration for it. Did you know that?
No. I can't sleep. So.
I was so totally struggling with how to write about Van Gogh because I think it's kind of insulting that everyone, thinks of him as the guy with the cut off ear. And I just think it's reducing his artwork to, to a mental or his emotional state at one time is kind of really insulting to him. And so I didn't want to go there, and I couldn't figure out where else to go. And, I had started with his mother and all kinds of things. And then Mary, when you and I met at the Caldecott Awards for The Noisy Paint Box, you said you were having a hard time sleeping. You're working on something.
Yeah.
And I was like, so did Van Gogh. That's weird. I wonder if all artists sometimes have insomnia. And then it was like, bing, Vincent can't sleep, so that became that story. For Chagall, my inspiration is the America windows, and I'm assuming most of you are, obviously all of you are in Chicago, I would think, and
okay.
For Mary, and so
yeah, I have the numbers in front of me.
Yeah. Oh. Are you okay? So that the America's Windows at the Art Institute were something that my grandfather, who was my first storyteller, I actually even have it. That's Grandpa, and that's me at 3. And he's leaning over telling me a story, which is kind of what he was always doing. And he took me to see the Chagall windows when they were first put up in the early 70s. And I remember walking down those stairs and just feeling sort of like overwhelmed by the color blue. And I know that sounds funny because for someone who's, I'm not a visual artist the way all of you are. And I just remember just like, it's so blue. It's so warm and blue. Like I literally felt like hugs. So I wrote the book based on being hugged by a color. And then now Monet, which just came out 3 days ago or whatever it is. And that was just kind of, I just felt like kids, because all of our books are for children, that the thing that most surprised me about Monet is that I had not realized that he actually painted from a boat. And I thought the boat was just interesting. So kind of built the entire story around the boat. But I know you all want to know what Mary has to say because you're all visual artists and she has the really cool part of the storytelling to talk about.
Well, I'd just like to say briefly, I'll hold up the book, the latest book. Signed copies will be available if you win the prize. Please go ahead, Mary.
I was just going to say, Barb, you refer to yourself as not a visual artist, but I think you are, because the fact that blue spoke to you like it did means that you definitely respond to the visual. And the way that you write, there's no question that you get the visual. And that was the whole thing about illustrating for Barb's books. She's an amazing descriptive writer who feels what she's writing. And I actually kind of have shivers just talking about it because Barb's, I've had a long career of children's book illustrating. I started out with editorial illustrating, advertising illustrating. It's been about a 45-year career of making pictures for a living. The last 30 years, I would say, have been children's books, and Barb's books in the last part of that career, the latest part, have been one of my greatest joys, because Barb's writing, the way that Barb writes is so, it's very juicy. She gives me so much to pull from as an artist. If you, as artists, when you read the book, you'll understand what I mean. The way she describes a foggy morning that Monet is walking out of his house and into the garden before the sun even comes up, and the gray mist and the purple, the violet in his beard. I mean, she gets it, she sees it. So she's very much an artist who also writes. So thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Do you have more you wanted to say?
I hope she's going to show some things.
Oh, yes.
I have some things to show. I just, I wasn't sure exactly which books we were talking about, but I think we're focusing mostly on, I'm focusing mostly on Monet today, with a little touch of Vincent Can't Sleep. So Mornings with Monet talks about one morning in Monet's life painting on the Seine River. And he goes to the same spot every morning and paints this. As the light changes, as the weather changes, he struggles, and it talks about his struggle with that river since he was a young man. And we'll see some of those in the pictures that I am showing you today. So let's start with some of the PowerPoint slideshow that you have, and I'll just kind of lead you through, if that's okay. We're starting with a combination of drawings and paintings. Well, I guess first we're starting with some inspirational pictures. When I first was presented with the manuscript, I knew that I had to get busy and do my own visual research and look up these wonderful paintings that Monet did so that I could put myself in that spot as well. And so, Barb, do you remember how many paintings he did of this particular?
The Mornings on the Sun series, I think, is kind of unofficially 21.
Okay.
There's some argumentation about that, but 21.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I looked at these paintings, as many as I could find, and I saw, different times of the day. I saw different kinds of mist and the way the sun was hitting the trees, and I picked, of the, I guess, 21, I picked probably 5 or 6 to really get deep and heavy into how he painted. And you really need to go there in person and look at paintings to know how they're painted and understand. But as an illustrator in my little studio, I did my best to research through the internet and books and things like that. So here's one of the scenes that he painted. And I'm looking now at the way things fade in a tonal perspective, and the way he used light to bring our eye up to certain spots and shapes that would come out of that. Next slide, please. And I also needed to get some reference on his garden, because Barb references that in the morning when he walks through, and the colors. He's such a colorist that we can see that in the choices of the flowers that he would plant. Again, the way he uses light. There's his painting boat, a painting that I believe he did. Gosh, I'm sorry, I don't know who painted this. It might not have been Monet, but that is his boat. And there's not a lot of reference about what the actual boat looked like, but most of the reference, of course, are these little impressionistic paintings that you'll find once in a while. So it's a very simple structure, and thinking of a man and his sometimes assistant on that boat painting that many paintings is a pretty amazing thought when you think about, how messy and how much space we need as painters. And he really made use of each little square inch on that boat. Next slide, please. I also needed reference on the interior of his home because he starts there in the morning. Let me show you that piece. You can see that all right.
Yes, it's great.
Can you see me with this painting? Okay.
Yes.
Looking around, but yes.
Okay. So, doing my best to imagine that bedroom before the sun comes up, and wondering how I'm going to show this kind of hope for the day when he's standing there getting dressed, and hoping that his day on the river is going to go well for him. Next slide, please. Oh, paste down. We can keep going. Next. This is actually a layout of the book, so you'll see that sometimes there's not much going on until you actually create the art for it. So this is Barb's title, Mornings with Monet, and this is called what we would call the title spread. You can see our little Barb's dedication there. But my sketches for the book are quite tight so that everybody knows what's going on. And on the title page, I usually like to show the setting, where the artist lives, where the artist works, just to create the feeling of inviting us there to the space. And now we're going to hear the story that takes place on this boat. Next, please. There's that morning bedroom picture. I'm going to see if I can collapse my...
I'm just going to interject 1 second. I don't know if everybody realizes that this book is, it may not sound like it, but it really is nonfiction. The words, not the words, but the idea, there was a journalist who visited Monet, stayed overnight the night before, and literally got up with him and watched him on this entire trip, and wrote an article in French about it in about I don't remember dates. I'm really bad with dates for someone who does true stories for a living, but it's an old newspaper article. But that is really the whole actual true story that the book turns around, is there was an actual person, kind of narrating this day in a different way than I do it. But yeah, so the fact that he got up and all of this is true. I don't know that everybody wouldn't automatically know that about it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's a really good point. And, when I'm drawing these things out, I need to be really careful about all kinds of things that I didn't think about before, like, what kind of thing does he wear? Barb and I went back and forth about what he's wearing, and Barb made sure that I was correct on the fact that he's wearing what do we call that, a sweater, or
we called it a sweater because they called it, like in real life, it's called an overknit or something. That was how it was translated out of the French. And nobody could tell us what that really is. Like, I'm like, well, what is it? Does it have buttons? Does it not have buttons? And everyone's going, I don't know. Even like French speakers were like, what's an overknit translate to? They're like, we don't know. So yeah, it gets really detailed.
It does. And you don't think that you have to, research that much, but if you're going to tell a story and draw pictures of a real person, you really need to know the details. So she did her research, Barb did her research amazingly, thoroughly, wonderfully well. And then I carried on where I could with it visually. So I was also looking for a reference online about clothing in that time period as well, and furnishings and things like that. Next, please. And so, of course, he's leaving his house, and, I have to adjust what the viewer sees. I'm sure that if you stood at the garden and saw the bridge, you probably may not see the house like that at the same time. But because this is, I have to take some license as an artist so that I can bring all these thoughts together on 2 pages. When you think about the description of his house, the emerald door of his pink stucco house, past the palette, he's rooted in earth poppies. And so we're talking about the house and the flowers and crossing a road. And I could just show the house and we could imagine the rest, but I really wanted to show as much as I could. And so I created a scene that's you know, based in true, in fact, but stretched in my imagination so that I could show everything in kind of a dream-like way. I actually have that piece as well. Again, I don't know if you can see this. Hang on one second. I don't know if that's clear or not, but you'll see it in the book. And it's that foggy morning. It's the colors are muted, but I still needed to show enough color to bring some richness to it. The poppies were important to me, the reds, and then the violets in his beard that Barb talks about, which is wonderful. All right, next. So there's not actually a black text block here. It's just it's type that's reversed out of the foreground. We're seeing this more as a layout than a final book, and I actually thought that was kind of interesting because when I'm laying a book out in pencil, I'll get a kind of a semi-proof back after I do some final painting, and they'll plug those into the layout. So this is kind of like paintings that have been plugged into the layout, and then we can adjust from there. And I always think it's kind of interesting to see things before the final printed book because you don't get to see that normally. But this is a scene that I enjoyed doing because of the fog still. I love that foggy, misty feeling, and it's a good, quiet time before the sun comes out and the colors start popping at that point. So this is still kind of a quiet area, quiet time. And it's always a challenge to bring light to a scene that takes place in a dark time of day. I mean, still the sun hasn't come up, so this wouldn't really in reality be this light, but because it's a children's book and because I wanted to show a certain grayness and fogginess about it, I had to figure out how to do that. So this, using those violets and muted tones kind of was my way of doing that. And that's his gardener handing him the, or yeah, we're missing some of the picture here, but you get the idea. Next, please. And this is where we're talking about Monet's struggle to capture that powerful river. Again, the text is a little wonky with this layout perspective, but again, another way to blend one scene, the present moment where he's rowing his boat with his gardener assistant, and letting that water lead us down into talking about his life as a young man. Next. Finally, they've reached the boat, they're in the boat, and they are unwrapping the paintings to start the day and to take note of, you know, which one he'll start with again. Barb, anytime you want to interject how this all works with paint.
I don't know. I was fascinated by this. This is probably the first fact that drove the whole entire book from a story perspective. I was like, wait a minute, you mean, okay, he's on a boat. You mean he takes 14 wet paintings out there and matches them to this, you know, to the light in front of him? That to me was an astonishing thing. And sometimes when you're writing for children, you have to, when you get that kind of your own adult mouth kind of drops open based on a fact, you kind of know that that's something really important to the story, you know, because if as an adult you're fascinated by that, it's something you can really bring to children that, you know, that I just don't think people, I didn't really even know that oils take that long to dry. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say this to all of you, but I had a lot to learn about the whole process. But the fact that he took 14 paintings out and had slots and the whole thing had slats for them, it was just fascinating to me. Yeah. And Mary, do you ever have like more than one going? Like, always?
I'm an abstract painter now in my life, and I have about, you know, I paint paintings anywhere from 12 by 12 inches to 5 feet by 6 feet. And my studio isn't huge, but I get as many paintings up on the wall as I can, because I think painting on several at a time, and maybe some of you feel the same way, one informs another. You'll oftentimes get stuck on one. And so instead of trying to figure that out hour after hour after hour and getting nowhere, you move on to the next one and let that one sit. And then when you come back to that one a day or two later, you know what to do because you've had your answers happen over here on your other paintings. So I always encourage artists to paint on more than one at a time. I'm not sure, you know, I'm not a plein air painter. I've tried it a few times. I think it's a really difficult thing to do. I think it's an amazing thing because of the way nature changes minute by minute when you're standing there looking at it. So it really makes you see, and it really makes you pay attention. And I'm not sure how many of you work. I'm guessing some of you start a painting out there on your spot in nature, and then perhaps you, I don't know if you take photos and bring them back to the studio and finish, or you just take more visual painting notes and come back and finish, or how you do that. I'd love to hear from you too. But
I know what we haven't tried yet is that 14 slots at once. I don't think any of us will be doing that. But if I can interject, go to both their websites, but if you want to see something very different from what Mary is showing right now, www.marygrandpre.com, and you'll see some beautiful abstract works and some very interesting titles to them too.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, for me, abstract painting was just a really big door to walk through with all kinds of freedom, and that it comes with a lot of hard work. It's not just, you know, splashing paint around or making a shape. It really has the same things going for it that a good illustration would have. Good composition, value, differences, texture, you know, flow, all kinds of things that we all think about when we paint. So yeah, this particular piece of the interior of the boat, I didn't have reference of the interior of the boat. There'd be a little sneak peek of it once in a while in a painting, but it was, you know, I had to kind of make up.
But I can tell it doesn't exist. The art historians are like, no inside of the boat, nowhere.
Yeah, so this was kind of tough to think. You know, we did our best. So next, please. And when I'm designing the pictures for a book, I like to move around. I think of myself kind of as a movie director in a chair that moves around the scene and goes up and down. And I like to get different kinds of views on what's happening. So I wanted to raise up the view on this and just look down on the artist setting up his place of where he's going to be working. Again, we still have some of that fog coming in and then but now seeing some reflection in the water. Next. And back to some sketches. And this again, you know, Barb's research, finding out what other artists were friends of his and artists that he looked up to and artists that were, you know, doing important work at the time. You know, just finding out what they looked like, what some of their clothing was, what their, you know, understanding what the social aspect was too in a group of artists. So that was interesting. And also his first wife, and a little bit of research on that. There's not a lot of information all the time, and so you really have to piece together as much as you can find and go from there.
And sometimes some of the information that you do find is not particularly child friendly. And so it's like we do want to tell the truth. We never want to not tell the truth. But there's also things that perhaps are not, you know, 8-year-olds or 7-year-olds don't have context for either. So right. That's always a balance.
Or it's not pertinent to the story.
Pertinent to the story. Yeah. I mean, it's really a story about light and water to me in my head, light, water, and work. That's, I literally wrote those 3 words at the top of every draft, and that's where we go.
Yeah. And that's why it was fun to paint, because what's not fun about light, water, and work?
Well, painting, yeah.
Painting.
I like what you said, Barb, in the book about the Monet book. I just love this, where he says, Monet, and this is a quote, "I'd like to keep anyone from knowing how it's done," Monet has said, "but anyone who creates understands that art is not magic. It is work, 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 and then it is magic." So we can all keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I hope for that.
Yeah. Okay, next.
Is, oh, we're going on, great.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Robin, or?
No, I want to continue with the slideshow, please.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. And, you know, just getting really loose with color and giving the feeling of movement and water and light coming into his day. So the colors started getting lighter and brighter. Next. And as he paints, he thinks of many things: his lovely wife, his where he's been, what he's painted, what he's been challenged with the elements of nature.
I'm sure you're all familiar with.
Yeah. Right. Your easel is blowing over and falling off the cliff. Hopefully not.
There's a lot of wonderful stories there, but they can't all be told in a tiny book. But there's some really interesting Monet stories. If anyone ever gets a chance to read them, they're pretty interesting.
Yeah. Next. And just, you know, things as the day moves on and the light's coming up, and he needs to capture that moment when the sun is hitting the edge of the tree, or the reflection is just that certain way. You know what that feels like, I'm sure, where he's working fast. And so we're trying to give this idea of, you know, flick, dab, curl, fast movements, from one canvas to the next, moving things along, switching canvases. And then his long brush stroke, creating that horizon. Next. And his messy boat at the end of all of that. We sure know how that is.
I love this. I love the sweater. The shirt.
Yeah. And yes, we get so filled with paint, but it's worth it. And yep, I'd like to keep anyone from knowing how it's done. Definitely.
And he absolutely said those words.
So, yeah, this is just a beautiful book. Well, they're all beautiful books, and they all relate to art in some way. Chagall, Monet, Vincent, and Kandinsky, and they all have something. Well, the Kandinsky and Chagall have a little bit to do with special needs people, I think. So the synesthesia of Kandinsky, and you know, anyway, they also incorporate inclusion, I guess is the word I'm trying to say. So when you're writing a book, you have to think about inclusion too, I suppose, as part of how you're going to frame the story. Would you say, Barb?
Yeah, it's actually, that's kind of the whole thing. To do the research, I always think of it kind of like cooking. And it's that, you know, a lot of times the way I used to write in school, the way, you know, before I kind of did this in this more creative way, you know, how you have you have a recipe and then you have ingredients, right? So for me, the ingredients are all the recipe is like what I know a picture book is supposed to be. You know, there's rules for a picture book. Like I've only got about 500 to 1,000 words. I mean, there's there's definitely parameters, and the ingredients to me are all the research, which I'm going to just turn my thing a little bit. Do you guys see all the books on that table right there? I'm cleaning out this morning. Those are all my Monet. That's every single book I read to make, and plus the stuff on my computer. That's just the literal physical books to make that. You know what I mean? So, so I have all of these ingredients, right? So I know way more than goes in the book. But then the whole process, like you said, about inclusion, what do I want to put in and what do I want to put out? What is the theme? What am I trying to say? that's like the cooking. I always feel like I have ingredients and I have a recipe, but cooking it is what I do. Cooking it is the creative part. It's like, a little of this. No, let's take that back. No, we don't need to know about his first wife. Do we really need to know? I got to explain that she was his girlfriend for a really long time. And then they had 3 kids and then they only got married right before he died. Do I want to put that for 8-year-olds? No, I don't, you know? And so it's like you're cooking. I mean, you really are every day 20 to 30 versions worth of cooking. So yeah, you're right. And really quickly, I did want people to know that synesthesia is sort of not like a special, like, well, it's special in a way that it's almost like having a superpower. It's you know, it's not like a deficit in any way. It's like someone whose brain is actually working at a better or a different level, but a way more whatever I mean, a way more integrated level than the rest of us are. So yeah, kids tend to think too that synesthesia is like something wrong with your brain, but it's actually something super right with your brain in a way.
Which is very nice to pivot it to something positive instead of something negative, and very educational for the kids to know that. That's so great.
Right.
I'd
and
also
like a 2nd grader with synesthesia who didn't know it till I talked in her school. That was super cool. But we give a little test and she actually went, all the dots are blue, and everyone's like, no, they're not. And I'm like, if you have synesthesia, they are. So that was pretty interesting. And by the way, she's supposedly a terrific young artist too. So I think that sometimes those, you know, the way your brain works kind of can
a new Kandinsky.
Yeah, it can set you on a path. For sure.
I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add that you didn't add yet. I would ask, do you have a starting point, or I should say a daily ritual that helps you get in a creative mood, or, you know, a little cup of tea and a meditate, or something that puts you ready to be in the zone that we all should know about?
Barb?
You, Mary? I just get up early. I don't really have like you know, there are writers who do morning pages or journal every day or everything before they get started. And I think because I started this when I had a job and like a day job, not like this isn't, but I mean like I had to be their 9-to-5 job and young children at home. I had a very short amount of time. And I imagine that some of you are, you know, have that also in your life. And so I got up every morning between 4:30 and 5 in the morning and wrote for 2 hours before anybody woke up, and then went and, you know, did my mothering and did my work, and then came home. And by then was usually too, I don't know, frantic to do much creatively. That practice of getting up early, I still do it. There's no one young that I take care of anymore. I do this full time now. But my brain, I think finding the time that your brain works the best for you is important. It's important for me. That's my only practice, is if I'm working on something hard, I get up early and I work for 4 hours straight and don't get up until those are over, and then play around the rest of the day. But what's yours, Mary?
Yeah.
I don't really have a routine. I have a pretty full life. I have a teenage daughter, and my husband works at home too. He's also an artist. And so there's a lot going on at the house oftentimes, but you know, I like to get into the studio as early as I can with a good cup of coffee and I like music. I put jazz on oftentimes. And I kind of just sit for the first maybe half hour and look around and see what's on the wall, and kind of try to find a starting point, a door to walk through. And for me, it's just that you just have to pick up the paintbrush and start painting. If you think too much about it for too long, it's a lost cause. Painting and doing will promote and produce more painting. And there's no other way around it. You can't think a painting to its ending point. And that's very true for my abstract practice. As far as illustration goes, I usually have, you know, a goal. I'm going to get 2 illustrations done this week, you know, because I know how many are ahead of me. I know what the subject matter is. There's a more defined schedule and practice for my illustration work. But as an abstract painter, I kind of really have to be a little more intuitive about it and let it develop. But I have to show up and I have to pick up the paintbrush or nothing's going to happen. So that's where I am.
That's great. Errol Jacobson, one of our instructors here with Plein Air Painters, has a quote that is attributed to an artist. Maybe you know, Mary, I don't. The master has failed more than the novice has even tried. And I think that would be a good one for all of us here to think about when we're stepping out, that or the other way to say it is just have fun, at least in the beginning. Get yourself out there and get started.
I also like to look at it as an artist. I like to, at the end of the day, even if I don't have anything that I'm really happy about that I worked on all day or something I wouldn't want to show, I still consider it a successful day. There's no failure if you showed up and you got busy and you worked. There's nothing failing there. You learned something and it moved you to tomorrow. And so that's it. You just keep doing and you're moving forward no matter what the outcome has been. And I also don't like to look at painting in terms of a finished thing. It's always kind of a process. I paint over paintings all the time, you know, and maybe you rewrite things, Barb. I don't know, but
I still rewrite things that are published, Mary. If they let me, I'd take them back right now and I'm still like, oh, now I thought of a better word. So
you're growing, and that's the thing. Yeah. We never ever stop improving as long as we could continue to produce. And
don't you think that's true? Because the thoughts that you're having while the art is being produced, those don't stop when whatever is finished in whatever way. I mean, in our case, when we work together on these, this is a finished thing that we can't get back. But the thoughts, like I've been thinking a lot, even after this book, about like art and work and how different artists work, and those thoughts don't go away. And in fact, sometimes having produced something, they actually come back more frequently. And then you find yourself wanting to tinker or would I say it that way still? And yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
Well, we have about 1 minute left. So are there any parting words that you'd like to share with us? It's been a delight and an honor to have you both here. Any parting words, Mary?
I would just like to say thank you for inviting us here today. And I hope that we inspired you. I know that hope we can see your work sometime too, but just keep painting and keep showing up.
Keep showing up.
Yeah.
Once again, the books are available through Amazon. They're lovely books. They're as much poetry, I think, as they are writing prose. Such beautiful words. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
I want to add a thank you to that. You're getting all kinds of great notes in the chat, and also that these books, Women and Children First in Andersonville is offering these books at a discount for us. Great independent bookstore. So you can go in there and actually in all your mailings, there was a coupon for them, and where you can order it online or you can order it. So we hope that you sell many books, and we're going to give away at least 16 of them right now. Because these are just terrific. So Mary, it was so nice to meet you, and Barb, it's so nice to meet you again. And I found Barb at a children's book writing conference a few months ago. And so this was just a great thing to realize that the two of you could come and be with us. So, and Robin, thank you so much for interviewing them for us today.
Thanks for letting me try it. Thanks.
Sure, I had faith.